Welcome to the Kristen Dalton Wolf Show, Made to Be series. Join me and some of my closest friends and mentors as we share deeply personal stories and wisdom that's going to help you get through tough times and experience the fullness of who God made you to be. Welcome to the becoming of who you were made to be.
Even up to 5 years ago, if you had told me that I would be sitting here talking about my dating life or talking about what we're going to talk about today, I would have, literally deer in headlights would have been like, that is literally my worst possible fear, you know? I felt God saying, you're going to start a podcast. And I was like, okay, first of all, I've never been an interviewer. Don't know what that's about. Never been on camera like that. And then as I prayed about what it was going to be about, I started feeling really strongly it's about dating. And I was like, no. What are people going to think of me if they knew all my dating history and my years and years of dating brokenness? And even though I'd come a long way, there was still that level of like, well, nobody's going to want to hear that, and nobody's going to think I'm credible, and nobody's going to listen. Why would I do that?
Yeah.
I felt God say to me, like, if not you, who? Because nobody's talking about dating.
That's a really great thing to keep in anyone's mind. If not you, then who?
It really shocked me in the best way, you know?
That's good.
Yes.
I love that. Okay, so you were speaking about, you mentioned painful relationships that you've been through. And one thing I didn't know about your story is I learned that you were in a 2.5-year abusive relationship. Emotional, physical, sexual, and verbal. Okay. So I'm sitting here like, all those things, and it was 2.5 years. You also mentioned you're an Enneagram 3, which is an achiever. So
Yes.
Tell me how that all plays into why you stayed for that long.
For somebody like myself, and my history is very much like I tied myself to an identity of needing a guy, and I had some familial issues growing up and an absent father. Love my dad, but because of that, I attached to needing validation from men at a very early age. Like I was quote unquote boy crazy really young in my life, but I also simultaneously was like a performer. A la the Enneagram 3 stuff, right? And you can see that through my high school years and like growing up, I always had a boyfriend, always had a guy, and I was always performing, and I was always the top of my class. And I dressed up for school, and I was just like that girl that wanted to stand out. And so
be on the top of your game, be successful.
Just constantly berating myself and these internal dialogues of you are not enough. You could be better. And then I tried to counteract that by having men to make me feel good about myself.
Yeah, that makes you feel secure, desirable, loved.
Exactly. If you're beautiful, like I'm wanted, all those things. So flashing forward, when outside of college and into my career, was the top of my career. I was in New York, and I was in fashion, and I was like living this fashion dream at the time. And what nobody knew was behind closed doors to that epic lifestyle of like going to, Paris and Milan and doing all the fashion things. I was in an abusive relationship and staying up till 4 a.m. fighting with somebody and constantly doubting myself and questioning myself and not eating. And I had so much body dysmorphia even in that time too, just based on all the self-hatred.
Had you been in an abusive relationship before, or was this the first one?
No, I had not.
And so how did it start? How did you get into it?
Yeah, I think this is the part where, first of all, it's so easy for any person to get into an abusive relationship. I think if you haven't been in one, you just assume like, well, obviously if somebody's abusing you, you leave the relationship, right? Like, well, duh, that's the rational thing, of course. But when you are in a situation like abuse, it doesn't normally start off the bat with somebody being physically abusive. It's the process. There's a quote that's like, if you throw a frog into a pot of boiling water, it's going to jump out immediately.
Right.
But if you put a frog in a normal temperature water and you just turn it up slowly over time, the frog dies, like eventually, because it doesn't realize how hot the water is turning.
Oh, and it just stays there.
It just stays in it. Yeah. Until it's like, oh, well, this is now normal. Oh, this is normal. It's getting hotter, but it's normal, you know, until eventually it dies.
Wow.
And so that's what happens in abuse is, you know, you're dealing with somebody who oftentimes has their own set of, you know, brokenness and healing that needs to be done and things that they've never really looked into. And sometimes you're dealing with a narcissist, which was the case for me.
Who can be very manipulative, right?
Completely.
Yeah.
And so the first year of the relationship, there was no physical abuse, but it was emotional abuse consistently for the first year. And that really warps you. Like, the main form of emotional or verbal abuse is typically gaslighting,
right.
and you can have hard proof. And Kristen, I did. There were times where I had proof, like, hey, you were talking to this girl behind my back. Like, I have proof of this, and they just so cannot admit to it. You know,
and they'll make it your fault.
Like, yeah. And once an abuser sees that they have control over you, because it's a control tactic and manipulative tactic, then they come in with like all the things you want to hear, which is the love bombing or the sweet, like, you know, I care about you so much and I couldn't do my life without you. And you're like,
so they kind of kick you down on the floor. Yeah. So you need someone, and then they're the one.
Exactly. And then you're like, okay, well, they're not that bad. I did make that too big of a deal. I love this person, and you're in the cycle, and it's literally what I call the abuse cycle. It's like just a merry-go-round ride that you cannot get off by yourself oftentimes.
It sounds like kind of like a merry-go-round of like false hope. It's like, and I'm yo-yoing hope. And then you're like, oh, hope. If I just stay longer, if I can commit, if I could change him in some way, maybe everything will be better.
Yes. You cannot make a toxic person change. Only Jesus is going to be the one to change them. Yeah. But we get warped in it. And when you're especially you've been emotionally abused for that long, then it's so much easier for the other forms of abuse to start happening.
So how did you what did you do? How did you get out?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I was with him for 2.5 years. And that also included many breakups and many times where I wanted to leave him. I mean, I can't count, maybe 20, 30 breakups in 2.5 years. And even with the physical abuse, after months, I had a restraining order, all the things, and after months of even that break time, he ended up convincing me that I made it all up. And I ended up getting back with him, which...
You made it up?
Yeah, so he convinced me that I made it up. I literally believed that I had made up. The memories get further and further away. They warp you in with that emotional abuse, and they're like, no, I didn't really do that. You didn't remember correctly. You know, it's like, you're like, what? But I had marks on my body, like, and the police report said this. No, like, you made it up. I would never do that. So you're like, okay, did I make it up? And as it grows further and further away, even though you have a restraining order, it doesn't mean anything unless you tell the police that they're not enacting according to the restraining order. So
then he's coming back and he's like, even though you made all this stuff up about me, I'm going to come back to you and give you grace.
Yes, Kirsten, that is what happened. And my family, friends, I lost so many I lost so many friends, and my family wouldn't even talk to me in that season when I went back with him after that.
Yeah.
And I was like, he's being great for like 2 months. And then he started cheating on me again, meeting up with girls, lying about it. And eventually there was a really horrific night of abuse, but I just convinced myself that it hadn't really happened and it wasn't as dramatic as I had made it. So when it was happening, and in that evening that I specifically, the worst night of my life, I didn't know if I would even walk out of there, you know.
Physically?
Yeah.
What happened?
And so the only thing I could think to do in that time was record it, because I was like, I need proof that this is happening. I need to know tomorrow that I did not make this up, you know? And what was so sad is we had this pattern of fighting and yelling till like 4 a.m. And so I was yelling and screaming for help in a small New York apartment And nobody called the police because that was normal.
Yeah.
And so even though when I needed it most,
oh my gosh, Kait.
it was nobody called. And the next day was his birthday, and I threw him a birthday party. And I showed up, and I caked on the makeup, and I couldn't even comb my hair, wouldn't let him touch me, and had bruises, just everything. And I showed up and was like, I mean, the shame that you feel, like, of course this was going to happen again. Everyone told you that would happen again. And now you feel that much more shame. Well, I can't tell anyone because I chose to be with him again, so this is my fault. And so I stayed with him for weeks after that. Didn't tell anybody about what happened until, like, my breaking point was finding out another girl he was cheating on me with who came forward and told me. And it was still like there was tendencies to want to talk to him again, and moments where I did talk to him. I did meet up with him. And so even getting out of that cycle, which almost can feel like you're in an addiction cycle. You're like addicted to this terrible treatment, just like you're addicted to a hard drug.
Yeah.
And you have to remove any temptation, and you need lifeline and support. You need to tell people, you need to get into safe community, especially if you're in danger. You need to really call the National Abuse Hotline and get help, right? You need support. And then as you continue to wean yourself away from this person, you need consistent support and accountability, and then lots of healing. Because Kristen, for me, I think the biggest thing after that relationship was just, I hated myself. I was like, I allowed all of that to happen. And then you're like, how could I, this businesswoman that is living her fashion dream, like, how could I let this happen? How could I be abused like that? Dang. What's wrong with me, you know? And so the self-hatred was so deep, and it really took a lot of God revealing myself and God re-revealing like the core of who I am, at, like, even up into my childhood years, like going back to like Kait as a child, and who is she, and we can rewrite like who we are, you know. And so,
and it sounds like through your story you were really alone through a lot of it. Like you didn't, I mean, you did have people who were like, hey, Kait, get out, but then there was a part where you didn't feel like you could talk to anyone, and you were keeping so much to yourself. So do you feel like that had something to do with it? Just like people not really realizing what was happening?
Yeah, I think most people, especially when the abuser is like really charismatic and narcissistic, people don't have a lot of a lens to be able to see that. They're like, he's nice. Like, what are you talking about? And so I love what I get to do today, right? Because I love to be able to be some sort of voice for women that just do not feel seen and feel so misunderstood and feel like, well, nobody around me gets this. Because for me, nobody around me got it, you know? Until after my relationship ended, God put in my life this amazing angel of a woman who's now my best friend, who had been through pretty much the same thing. And it was the first person that was like, I know what you're going through. So you really do. It's so important that we have safe people in our life who know us and our story and who are wise enough to spot these things. You know, I just had people who weren't wise, you know, like they're lovely people, but they're not people that are walking in the way of Jesus necessarily, or have a heart of empathy and want to seek to understand in their daily lives. And so if they weren't living that way, then how could I expect that they would come alongside me in that way?
I think that's a really good point for anyone who has a friend who's maybe in a abusive relationship, or just a relationship that the friend doesn't really approve of. How would you encourage those people who are frustrated right now? They have someone in their mind. They're like, oh wow, this makes me think of so-and-so. But they're like, how can I really support her in a way where she's not going to continue this behavior? Or maybe that's not the right question.
I think the number one thing I needed was just a safe place to land. I didn't need somebody necessarily telling me all the right or wrong things to do. I need someone to listen and just be soft and gentle and have sympathy if they couldn't have empathy for my situation, and be willing to walk with me. Like, really. And then if it was really dire, somebody who would stand up and be like, okay, we need to get you out of this, you know, in the case of extreme abuse and things like that. But
that's good.
Where you're just seeking to understand. And you can see when somebody is constantly chaotic, like in there, and they can barely focus with you because their inner world is so a tornado because they can't stop processing what's happening with this guy or whatever. Like there's something deeper going on there.
Yeah.
So the best thing you could do is be like a calm presence and a safe place for that person to land and not make that person feel more dramatic or more crazy than they probably already feel on the inside. Just like, hey, is something going on? Like, I'm here for you.
Yeah.
Like, can I hear, or can I be here?
Yeah.
Do you want to share anything? Do you want to just watch a movie tonight? And like, see how that person opens up. Yeah.
People don't care about what you know until they know that you care.
Yeah.
Okay, what is the favorite thing that has been worked out in you through that pain?
Yeah, I think that was the hardest and longest season of healing after that in my life. And I think the biggest thing that God showed me, because I took a lot of time to take inventory of like, okay, you've dated for 10 years, back to back. I was never single in those 10 years. It ended with a 2.5-year abusive relationship. And I started realizing, like, I didn't know who Kait was outside of dating.
Yeah.
I didn't know who Kait was without men, without needing validation, performing. And so what I realized is that I had to learn to love myself, to not lose myself. Because rejection is going to happen, right?
Yeah.
Somebody is going to hurt us or say no to us or turn us down or not approve of us or whatever it is. But loving ourselves to not lose ourselves is going to change the game. And that, for me, that was the biggest thing.
That's such a good phrase. I need to love myself so I don't lose myself, basically, to everyone else, to circumstances, or to what I think is going to give me love that's actually going to leave me more empty.
Yeah.
That's good.
Yeah.
Thank you for stewarding your pain and putting it into a book. So you can help accelerate other people's, experiences that they're going through, to give language and context to what they're experiencing.
I love you. Thank you for doing this and for having me.
Thank you for blessing everyone with your story, girl. I love you.
Love you.